Sam Levy. We have two items on our agenda this evening, but just before we go ahead and get started with that, just a couple reminders for our committee. Most people are doing this already, but just a reminder that your attendance at this meeting is also contingent on having your video on to comply with the state's open meetings law. Also, a reminder for the committee that we have an additional joint meeting with our Parks and Public Spaces Committee next Monday as well, Monday, March 28th. So we will come together with the Parks Committee next Monday as well to hear a couple of joint items before us. Anyway, with that, we'll dive into our agenda for the evening. We have two items on our agenda tonight, a presentation and a discussion. We don't at this point anticipate that either of these items will necessarily require action by the committee, but we'll indeed see how each of these discussions goes. With that, our first item on the agenda tonight is a presentation by the Flatiron Partnership on their plans for an open street on Broadway between 25th and 27th Streets this summer. We'll hear from the presenting group. We'll have an opportunity for the committee to ask them questions, and then we'll also have an opportunity for any members of the public who are in attendance to ask questions or make any comments. With that, I will go ahead and turn things over to members of the Flatiron Partnership who are in attendance tonight. I see Kurt. I'm not sure if anyone else is joining you tonight, but please feel free to go ahead and get started. I'll just ask you, I'm not sure how much you're planning on presenting this evening. It might be worth trying to keep it contained to 10 or 15 minutes.
Yeah, no sweat, AJ, sure thing. I'm flying solo tonight, so it's just me. It's great to see everybody. My name is Kurt Kavanaugh. I'm the Director of Planning with the Flatiron 23rd Street Partnership, the Business Improvement District for the Flatiron District, as well as Nomad. Recently, as of January 1st, we expanded our bid boundaries. On January 1st, we used to service roughly 21st to 28th Streets, 6th Ave over to Park Avenue South. We go to 3rd Avenue on 23rd Street, but we recently expanded to encompass more of the Nomad District. So we're now down to 20th Street up to 31st Street, 6th Ave to Park Avenue South. And I just want to give a presentation on some plans for actually this spring for what we're kind of calling Nomad Piazza 2.0. And if it's okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
Please do.
Great. And I have a few slides here. I won't take too much of your time. It's a beautiful night. But I want to make sure you all can see this.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Great. So yes, again, we are planning to bring back Nomad Piazza. And what is Nomad Piazza? Last year, we kind of hardened our open street on Broadway from 25th Street to 27th Street by adding planters at the street ends to harden it, to really keep vehicles off, and to add public space to the district. This was from October 1st through November 14th of last year. And really this grew from the NYC Open Streets program and the outdoor dining programs. In May 2020, when the pandemic was really starting, we were one of the first groups with the city to partner with DOT on open streets on Broadway. And from that grew into outdoor dining in July of 2020, a few months later, and a few restaurants have taken full advantage of that, including the Smith near 27th Street and La Porta Bianca at 26th Street, and some fast casual restaurants from 25th to 26th Street as well. And all this is on Broadway. Our goal with what we called Nomad Piazza last year really was to build on the success of the Open Streets program and the outdoor dining programs, and to increase public space and public seating, and while beautifying Broadway with seasonal plantings. And we also wanted to monitor impacts on traffic, on biking, on walking, on accessibility, to really help the DOT plan future Broadway vision projects. So last summer and into early last fall, we partnered with Balfamonte Landscape, our horticulture group, Street Plans, a Dumbo-based planning firm, AIA's New York chapter, and of course NYC DOT, Street Plus, which is our in-house sanitation team, the Nomad Alliance, who did a lot of outreach work with us with local businesses, and the Home Depot on 23rd Street, who have donated a lot of the materials, including the paint and the bistro tables you see to the left there, to really enliven this space. So last fall, for 6 weeks, we really built on the success again of the outdoor dining and open streets program by painting the street blue and really giving it a flash of color, adding tables and chairs, Adirondacks, and really just inviting people to come spend time on Broadway in the district. And see some more photos here. People really seem to love it. We had a site-specific survey on via QR codes, both with standing signs and with signs on the public furniture, that garnered about 300 responses, with about 90% of respondents saying they loved it. The most used words in the responses were love and permanent. Blue was also used a few times, so it was very blue and very noticeable. But it was really a nice mix of people who lived in the area, worked in the area, were visiting New York from another neighborhood. So it was mostly locals, and people were just either spending time passing through, or they were actually coming to eat, to use the public seating, or to shop in the district. And two comments that I wanted to highlight from the survey included, quote, "I love it. I would love a permanent place like this to eat and refresh while shopping in the neighborhood." Another was, "I've been living on 27th Street and Broadway for over 20 years, and this is the best idea ever. Love the display, the tables, and the wooden chairs. Please keep it this way." The wooden chairs were the Adirondack chairs. And then social media was also well loved. We got a lot of kudos on social media. After the 6 weeks were up, we actually also surveyed directly the stakeholders in the district on those 2 blocks, 25th to 27th Streets, ground floor businesses, as well as the property owners. And what's kind of amazing is that every stakeholder who responded, one, supports a future reconfiguration of Broadway from 25th to 27th Streets, and two, they felt the area was as safe or safer during this activation period. And a full third of the respondents said they saw an increase in revenues, and no stakeholders saw decreased revenues during this period. And some kind of quick lessons learned from last year was that seemingly people loved the open space and want more of it. Public seating and the greenery seemed to complement the outdoor dining and gave the public component of what some have said is a privatization of public space with the outdoor dining. And then we need to collaborate with stakeholders earlier in the process for public programming. The Piazza or temporary plaza needs dedicated sanitation and public safety resources, much like our plazas down at 23rd Street. We also noticed that micromobility and bicycling has definitely arrived, and I think has outpaced infrastructure. For instance, a good 1/5 of those on bicycles or scooters were going uptown. And most of that was, I wouldn't say most, but the majority of those riders were commercial cyclists doing deliveries and working. And painting the roadbed was very memorable, but really a pain in the butt to remove, but it was removed. And it took about 2 weeks of in-house work to actually remove it with power washing, kind of in the early mornings or actually overnight hours. So we wanted to be as mindful of its impact to the businesses that were open serving outdoor dining. This year, we are planning to, again, kind of do the same thing, sans blue paint. We'll have harden the edges of the street ends with planters, put tables and chairs out, public seating elements. I know those might be kind of tough to see, but really it's about 16 chairs and 8 tables on the 25th to 26th block, and maybe some shade umbrellas this year as well. And then a lot more items in the 26-27 block, as there's more space. There are fewer large outdoor dining structures, and really a great possibilities up there of what we can do. And we'll work again with the DOT, with our local partners on making sure this gets off the ground. And we'd like to actually start this soon, probably next week, like around April 1st, to actually start this. So it's pretty quick. But that's what we're planning for this year. We are not painting. We are definitely not painting. But really what we see it as is another opportunity for testing and evaluating a temporary plaza to really help DOT plan out what is next as part of Broadway vision. Last year, we worked directly with DOT on the shared street from 21st to 23rd Streets. What we saw from some of the intercept surveys and the cycling counts and such was that it is working as was designed, and that people really do treat it as a public space, the entire roadbed. Even if it's not fully closed to automobile traffic, you're seeing very low numbers of drivers driving through, and what you're seeing is only commercial delivery and some for-hire vehicles picking up or dropping off on those blocks. It's very quiet actually, but it does seem to be doesn't seem to be hurting the economic reality of those blocks, with a lot of the empty storefronts filling in with a lot of retail signings. But we understand that DOT will be working on plans for Broadway from 25th to 32nd Street this spring. And I think this will be a really good chance for them to, one, observe again with us, but also do on-site outreach with us or with their team, or a combination thereof, this coming spring in advance of finalizing draft guidelines. Again, what to expect: edge planters, public seating, partner programming. We are planning to partner with our friends on 23rd Street, who will remain nameless right now, for World Table Tennis Day. We can probably figure out who that is if you know table tennis in Flatiron, as well as DOT's Car for Your Earth Day. We do plan to work really closely with them on tabling, on getting information out, on celebrating that day in Flatiron/Nomad on the 23rd. And we do think there'll be more participants, restaurants participating, in outdoor dining this coming Piazza season, as we're calling it. And the timeline really is we've been planning and kind of prepping now. We'd like to open around April 1st, and I know that DOT, I haven't seen draft designs by any means, but they are planning 25th to 32nd, as well as some blocks up in Times Square, is my understanding, as part of the next iteration of Broadway Vision, with what I understand could be more Broadway Vision implementation in the second half of this year. But that's the quick presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions or to go back to any slides if you'd like.
Great, thank you. Very, very efficient. Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, so just, I mean, a couple of reactions. I mean, number one, it's really interesting to hear that virtually all the businesses on these blocks say that their business was ultimately not negatively impacted by the block being closed to traffic, because I feel like we get a lot of those concerns from businesses prior to a block being pedestrianized for the first time. And so obviously these two blocks are totally closed to traffic, with the exception of the bike lane, which is totally open to all of the two-wheel traffic, essentially, right?
That's right. Yeah, and also the bike lane plus buffer does serve with the available width that's there. It does serve both as the bike lane and also the emergency access lane. Got it.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. One question I have is that you showed maps that showed that like most of the block from 25 to 26 is taken up by businesses that have the current as of right ability under open restaurants to set up in the street. So you have kind of limited space on that block. 26 to 27, you showed more space, but there were also a couple of sections in there, that are the purple outlines that are potential outdoor dining. Am I right in understanding that, and we're talking about the current open restaurant rules and not the future open restaurant rules, because it all gets kind of confusing. But under the current open restaurant rules that will be in effect for the remainder of this year, for example, if any of those locations decided to take advantage of the ability that they have under the open restaurant rules to set up their own private dining space in that area, it would, that's their right under the open restaurant program, and you would kind of just lose that programming ability for those outline spaces. Is that correct?
Yeah, what I think is probably most likely to happen is those outline spaces would be that the curb spaces that are outlined there will be used in some capacity, and then maybe during maybe seasonal in terms of summer, maybe when they actually get open, because they're not open yet. they would extend beyond that curb lane into the roadbed. And yes, that would go offline, so to speak, from public seating. But we do plan to install public seating there until they open. So
Okay.
yeah.
Yep. Sounds good. That is what it is. Okay. Yep. Great. Well, thank you. Those were my questions. And at this point, I'll kind of throw it to other members of the T&E committee. Are there any other questions from members of Community Board 5? Just use the raise hand feature if you have any. Yeah, Janice Young.
Yeah, thanks, Kurt, for this presentation. It's really wonderful to hear that, the past implementation of this has been really beneficial for not just, people in the city, but businesses as well. My question has to do with, I'm curious if you or members of the organization have looked at this plan from more of like a sustainability lens. So I know you mentioned sanitation and, like sourcing the materials for building these things. It's great that you don't feel the need to paint the street this year, but yeah, if you can talk more about that, if that has been like what considerations have fallen under that category.
Yeah, great question. And I will say that we did work with providers last year from the Flower District on providing some of the materials, but our approach with this is that we do plan to reuse and reutilize every piece of the furniture that is on here. It's not just temporary for just this, but we do plan to have it around the district after the life of this. The planting material, I can't lie and say it's always composted, but we do ask that it's composted after the season is over. And the transportation on this is all bike ped. So that's, I would say, a good thing from a sustainability aspect, but I will say that we do have our own challenges with like quote unquote closing the street with commercial delivery and with carting, but those are mostly happening at street ends or off hours when they can access the site. But from a sustainability standpoint, I think it's kind of work with every business on making sure that they're using materials that are as green as they can be, but we can't really push that too hard at this moment.
Great, thanks. If that's not something that can be considered for this year, since April's coming up so quickly, is that definitely something that could be considered moving forward? Yeah,
for sure. I mean, the businesses along both blocks, they seem to really care about the sustainability of what is next for this, as well as their own businesses. We're starting to work with our friends over at Madison Square Park Conservancy on reviving an idea that I can't share all the details, but it's basically what they're calling a green dining destination for the district that we really want to work with them on, and these blocks would be definitely front and center in that campaign.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Jenna. Fortunato.
Hi, Kurt. Yeah, thanks for this presentation. I'm in that area quite frequently, and I'm a really big fan of the open spaces kind of policies. And I'm very excited for the second rollout from the DOT, especially because it's my block. My question really has more to do specifically with the bike lane infrastructure and what the plans are for helping to deal with just that influx of traffic going through there, because there is quite a bit of that kind of overlay of just so many people coming through. And I think a lot of tourists coming through because they're coming right from Herald Square too. So unfamiliarity with the city and a kind of clear way of telling cyclists how to navigate the space.
Yeah, great question, Fortunato. Actually, last year we learned that pretty quickly, that if you notice at 27th Street and actually at 26th Street, there's some additional hardening or volume additions of planters. Right. The goal with that really is to more naturally funnel those on bicycles to the lane as opposed to through the piazza, right? Because we've learned that right away my goal this year is not to have this thing rung with standing barricades, right? But to naturally kind of funnel folks to use the bike lane. And the reality is that, as I said in the presentation, the bike infrastructure has been it's inadequate there because it's one way. And if we want to just think that that's going to go away because we tell people to go, southbound only, we're kidding ourselves. And I think DOT is realizing that as well. So I think the future of this space very well could call for bidirectional facilities. And I would like to see more, a stronger effort from the planners of DOT to really figure out a really good way to get folks to use the lane as opposed to go through the public space. But we're going to be hardening the edges a little bit more at the 27th and 26th Street ends specifically. The crosstown traffic, bike traffic on 26th Street really goes both ways, right? And we want to get them to use the lane, even if they're, if they are going uptown, use the lane. If they're going downtown, use the lane. So at least it's there as opposed to all, through the public space, the whole lane itself.
Great. Thanks, Kurt. Thanks, Fortunato. Any other questions from members of the committee? Yeah, Joel.
So Kurt, you talked about the bike lane being constricted. So I want to say I walked this, if not every week, every other week in the last couple of years, and it's really nice between 27th and 26th, and then you get to 26th Street, and La Pecora Bianca is basically 3 out of the 4 lanes, and the only thing left is the bike lane. So there's no pedestrian space on that block, or at least on the north half of that block. That outdoor seating just seemed to expand and expand at the beginning until it took over just about everything. I know they have a right to take a lane, either the parking lane or the lane next to the bike lane, but do they really have the right to take all 3 lanes and use all that up? There's just no place to walk.
Yeah, that's true. They do use a lot of the roadbed. I believe they're not utilizing the parking lane on the far side, which is a buffer lane, or the lane next to the bike lane buffer. I will follow up with them and make sure that's the case. But you're right, it does feel pretty squeezed, partly also because of the existing scaffolding on both sides of the street. So it does feel more pinched. But you're totally right. There's very little width that is at the northern end of the street.
Is there a way to restrict them, or a plan to restrict them, to keep them in maybe just 2 lanes out of the 3 or 4?
I can speak with them. I would have to take a look at what DOT would actually say about the outdoor dining space that's available there. We have had, Bill, on the same block, when Wagamama is open too, they will sometimes butt up to the Tortazo space, which they could, because we have share both sides. You see, up at the northern end of 26th Street, where Lati was, La Pecora Bianca does have the ability to build out, according to DOT's full closure out open streets, which is a mouthful. So let me speak with them and see if they can obviously give some more back to pedestrian space.
That'd be great. Thanks.
Thanks, Joel. Noah.
Hi. On the north side of 26th Street, if you could just go back to that slide for a sec, between 26th and 27th. Yeah. I think I'm seeing 5 planters and 2 metal barricades on that street.
Yeah.
And then on 27th on the south side, I think that's 9 or 10. What's kind of the reasoning?
Yeah, that's actually a point where we have to be a little flexible on allowing some carting overnight. So that's why those are barricades as opposed to planters.
Okay, and then the planters, what's kind of the style of them?
Yeah, they're the DOT planters that you see down at the Flatiron public plazas, and they're actually still on site. They're just on both sides of the Smith's outdoor shed right now. So they were repurposed there for the time being, and will be moved. We hope next Wednesday or Thursday to kind of. And they're there. They're also on the ends of both 27th Street and 26th Street of the Smith, as well as. They're on the pedestrian extension at 26th and 25th right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Noah. Any other questions from members of the committee? All right. Not seeing any other hands. We will throw things open to any members of the public who are in attendance and would like to either ask a question or make a comment. We'll ask you to please, if you're intending to speak at all, please use the raise hand feature now so we know how many people we're dealing with, and try to limit your comment or question to 2 minutes tops. I see one hand. It is Charles, and Charles, you are able to unmute yourself. Please go ahead.
Hi. Yes, hello. So I got 3 quick concerns. Firstly, I'm concerned about accessoride access to the pedestrianized blocks. You did say that, and do correct me if I got it wrong, but I believe you said that the blocks can be accessed by delivery trucks, and I'm wondering if maybe a exemption can be made for accessoride vehicles and the on-demand taxis that they use if possible, or just the blue and white buses to enter that block, because if someone wants to go to a business there, they need to be able to, get straight to the business. The other concern I have is you mentioned, Kurt, about the traffic being a lot more slower, and I've noticed that on Broadway and 22nd Street and 21st Street, for example, and it's very difficult for someone who's blind like me to be able to hear when the traffic is coming, to know when it's safe to cross the street. So I'm hoping that you could please advocate for the DOT to put audio pedestrian signals there for pedestrians. I did mention it before to the DOT, but maybe if you can mention also, it might add some weight. And the last concern I have is, public spaces are great, and especially for someone like me who's blind, it's great when you have something like summer streets where you can just walk for blocks and blocks and there's no traffic. But the problem is I have no one to assist me or help me to those areas. Times Square Alliance and the 34th Street Partnership have helped me with assistance in accessing Bryant Park and Times Square when they have events. Is there some way that in future we could have some sort of volunteer or maybe someone to help me, especially for summer streets? I really would love to get some exercise and enjoy that long stretch. If that's a possibility, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, the advocating for more of the signals with DOT, we should absolutely do that. We will do that with part of the Broadway Vision planning that they're planning right now. And then access for Accessoride, we could probably make sure that's accessible via the emergency access lane along the east side of Broadway for those blocks. What have for Times Square and 34th Street? Have they set up a special program for you said like volunteers, or is it a program that they run in house?
You still can hear me, right? I think.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's 2 different things. The president, Mr. Harris from the Times Square Alliance, he was very kind enough to give me his number. What happens is I call him up when I like to go to an event, and he gets one of the Times Square Alliance employees to basically assist me in the event in Times Square. And they meet me from my vehicle, and then they make sure I get into my vehicle. With 34th Street Partnership, I call up the office, and they have been receptive to meeting me at a location right by Bryant Park from my vehicle, and help me again in the event, and then help me back into my taxi so I can go home. We've been kind of doing it like that, where I would call them up when I'm interested in a program. So there's no actual, at the moment, to my knowledge, some actual program instated, but at the moment it's just I guess as sort of as something interests me, I'll call them up, and I hope more blind people would do the same maybe in future, to enjoy. Like, for example, I did the ice bumper cars at Bryant Park. The only thing
Awesome.
the only thing I can legally drive. So that was a lot of fun. So yeah. So and Times Square has been great. I really enjoy all the Broadway songs and music they have there. So yeah, I'm really pleased, and I hope maybe something similar could be done, especially for the summer streets too, which would be great.
Yeah, sure thing. Actually, let me give you my direct line at the office right now.
Okay. Thank you.
If you're ready for it, I can say that.
Yes, I'm ready.
Or should we? I don't
Oh.
know if you want to broadcast it.
Offline. Oh yeah, maybe you want to do that offline.
I don't mind.
The board office is happy to bring the two of you together to
Sure.
to share.
We can do that too. Either way, either way, it's fine.
Whatever you're comfortable with.
Okay. Yeah, EJ, I'll happy to send that over and connect. But we could probably work with you as well as our team, including our public safety / neighborhood ambassador officer, so it can be very helpful as well.
Yes, that's what I think the Times Square Alliance does. They use their safety officers to help me. I think that's the employees they use.
Perfect.
When I'm there. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question. Thanks, Kurt. Yeah, you know, on the topic of the accessoride, like for example, where we're looking at the block 25 to 26 right now, you said that the bike lane and the buffer lane can be used as the emergency access lane as well, and you kind of indicated that it could potentially be used maybe for accessoride as well. Because this lane doesn't have gates like you showed on the other one that can be removed for karting, is that how karting takes place on this block as well?
It has. A lot of it's going to the edges now.
To the edges.
To the street ends.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Yep. Makes sense. Perfect. Thanks. Any other questions or comments from any members of the public who are in attendance? Not seeing any other hands from any members of the public or members of the committee. I think that probably wraps up this item on our agenda. Kurt, thanks very much for this update. We're glad it was so successful last year and that you've got good plans to continue it this year. Marisa, maybe if you could just shoot an email that brings together Kurt and Charles so that they can share contact information, that'll be great for the board office to do that. And if we have any other questions, Kurt, we'll send them along. But thanks so much for giving us an update tonight.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.
Thanks, you too. All right. So with that, we'll go into the second item on our agenda this evening, which is an update from our committee's own bicycle and street use enforcement team. Just as a reminder for a little bit of context, over the past years, we've continually heard many concerns, anecdotes, and stories about misuse of bike lanes and disregard of rules and regulations about the proper use of bicycles and electric vehicles. You know, usually spoken up by members of this committee, you know, members of the public, and particularly outspoken residents in the district. This committee is repeatedly on record, almost always supporting the installation of bike lanes. We're on record supporting a comprehensive street use plan and comprehensive street use design that balances alternative methods of transportation and provides for the safe sharing of street real estate by you know, multiple methods of transportation that are not just cars, bicycles, electric vehicles, pedestrian access, and tries to prioritize safety for all. You know, we're very much, you know, in support of bike lanes. Nevertheless, we know that misuse of bike lanes and you know, misuse of sidewalks, buffer zones, wrong way use of bike lanes by two-wheeled vehicles is, you know, continues to be at minimum a concern for residents. You know, whether you want to call it a quality of life concern or a safety concern, the fact that there is concern out there is just a, you know, a fact of our community. As a committee, we regularly mentioned, you know, the need for better education and enforcement every time that we, you know, do come out in support of a new bike lane, and we've tried regularly to engage the NYPD to find out how they can, you know, better safely enforce the proper use of bike lane and bike shares, etc. But frankly, we've gotten very little policy adjustment or you know, enforcement adjustment and the concern of residents persists. So about a year ago, we put together a group within our own committee here, comprised of our committee members, Joel, BJ, and Noah, to explore policy options for us, since continually begging NYPD to step up their enforcement has not led to any stepped up enforcement. We're going to get an update from them this evening on who they've been engaging over the past several months, elected agencies, city offices, etc. And we should, basically, we're thinking that we should start to have a discussion tonight about what, if anything, can conclude this investigation, and what, if any, action should we take. I'll turn things over to our little task force in a second, but I just want to emphasize, we know there are concerns. This doesn't have to be this discussion tonight really should not be a new airing of the fact that there are concerns. We hear about them literally every time we talk about bike lanes. Tonight's update and discussion should really try to focus on starting this, concluding discussion on whether or not there's policy action that we should take. Is there some type of regulation or legislation or new enforcement policy that we should call on a specific entity, be it city, be it state, be it NYPD, be it DOT, to take and to start to bring us around to action that we can take as a community board, which of course usually takes the form of a resolution and a policy prescription, and something that we end up supporting. I think that should be the goal of any discussion that we're taking here, not necessarily just a reiteration of there's a problem and residents have concerns. So with that framing, I want to hand things over to Joel and the team to give us an update about their work over the past couple of months.
Thanks, EJ. As EJ said, for the past, it's at least 6 years, each time we've passed a resolution supporting a bike lane, and every bike lane that's come before us, we've passed. I can't think of one where we didn't, other than one where we asked for a little modification, but we pass them all and wholeheartedly support them. We've included in almost every resolution a request of DOT to say, please do something about education, do something about enforcement, work with NYPD. I don't think we've ever, until 6 months ago, reached out directly to NYPD, but we did ask DOT, and DOT has never gotten back to us. They've never responded to our request for information. They've never responded to our request for statistics on bike lane incidents until late last year. At that time, we had a call just with representatives of DOT, and we specifically raised this issue. And the response was basically, the response was clearly that this is not a problem. Pedestrian safety from bikes is not a problem because the statistics don't bear it out. DOT said it's a matter of perception. People think there's a problem, but there really isn't. So we shifted our route and we started talking to NYPD. Marisa and Noah and BJ and I met with a whole group of people at NYPD last November. We had a very productive discussion. Lots of things lots of possibilities were raised. NYPD talked about education. They talked about engaging the local precincts for additional enforcement. They talked about outreach, meaning there are a lot of vehicles that were recently legalized by the state legislature just before COVID, and then again by the city council separately to say that electric bikes were now legal, electric scooters were now legal. They did not legalize a whole lot of other vehicles that you see every day walking down the street, riding down the street. Mopeds are not legal unless they have license plates. Electric Segways and similar vehicles are not legal at all in New York City on public streets, and yet they're all over the place. So NYPD talked about outreach to retailers to talk about enforcement, or to at least have them notify their customers that they're buying vehicles that cannot legally be operated on New York City streets. This NYPD also talked about outreach to delivery establishments and delivery companies, both restaurants and the bigger, DoorDash and companies like that, trying to get them to engage in enforcement. They promised to get back to us. That was November 12th. They finally got back to us at the very end of February, and basically after many reminders, and basically said the same thing that that DOT had said, that they said 99% of pedestrian deaths that have been caused in New York City in the past I forget how many years, were caused by by cars and SUVs, and not by bicycles. Therefore, we are not changing any of our enforcement strategies. We need to focus on where the most deaths occur. They went on to say that they will still talk to some of the delivery companies, and they'll do some outreach to retailers. But they think that the next steps to take to alleviate this problem are education and outreach. So we hit a dead end at DOT. I think we've hit a dead end with NYPD as well. And we as a subcommittee of this committee are just, kind of fishing for how do we move this forward. We can't get statistics because NYPD doesn't keep track of statistics of injuries. They only keep track of deaths when pedestrians are killed by bicycles, unlike car accidents where pretty much everything is kept track of. So the statistics are not going to bear us out because the statistics don't exist. Where do we go? We're bringing this up today for kind of like an open discussion of suggestions of ideas.
Thanks, Joel. So, I mean, yeah, I think that's where we're at. We're brainstorming here a little bit. As Joel said, it seems like from DOT's perspective, they can't enforce anything. From NYPD's perspective, it's not worth enforcing anything. And they both kind of point to education and outreach as what they are capable of. And I suppose, if we were to accept that as really the only path forward, perhaps we could engage both agencies and make some specific recommendations as to how they could better be doing outreach. Beyond that, I think, as Joel just said, we're open to suggestions here. This task force was not meant to be, an endless, Sisyphean, effort, and we'd like to bring it to a conclusion with some type of path forward, either in terms of, specific things for Community Board 5 to focus on, be it those education and outreach efforts, be it some kind of specific new call for legislation, which, as Joel pointed out, could fall entirely on deaf ears. If it's something that's already been rejected by the powers that be. So I think we're curious to start that discussion tonight. It doesn't have to conclude tonight, but I think we do want to be in the concluding months of this investigative effort and to figure out next steps. So we'd love to hear ideas. I saw Sarah's hand first, so Sarah, go ahead.
Well, talk to elected representatives. I don't know if that's been done or tried. And I don't know if it's worth the effort.
So Sarah, we did talk to Representative Keith Powers' office. We didn't really get a whole lot of interest in the issue. We didn't talk to other representatives. I raised it with Keith's office because I knew him, but that was about it.
Yep, I think I think that's kind of been our experience every time. Anytime we have a discussion with elected officials, our elected officials at least are very supportive of bike lanes, and I think I think there's not a lot of nuance in their position, whereas we try to land we've tried to land at a somewhat more nuanced place, which is to say, yes, 100% support bike lanes, but also there are some of these other issues as well. Yeah, Sam.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, EJ. I think one of the things, because I've been having this discussion now for, I think, as Joel said, 6 years or so. And I think we have always framed the issue as one of public safety. And I think the problem is that we end up in a situation where we are using a bar, which is death or dismemberment or coma or serious injury, rather than actually being able to understand that threats to safety might just be someone having to move out of the way in a hurry. And if they're elderly or have any mobility challenge, that becomes a safety threat. I think that my gut feeling was, and I put this in an email to the people in the smaller group, which is that we might have to reposition this as an issue of a quality of life issue, in the same realm of perhaps things like, noise, public urination, things that make it less pleasant to live in the city, where it doesn't become about an endless argument over whether it's a safety statistic question, but simply to say, as I think we all know, this is sort of the number one issue that comes up every single time we talk about bike lanes. And so I think one of my minor proposals is perhaps we reframe and perhaps look at this as a quality of life issue and pursue it in the same way that some of the issues that have gotten traction amongst the city, like homelessness and urination and threats of safety on the subway, which we know are statistically not that huge either, potentially reframe it in that direction. So that's just a thought as perhaps how we move forward.
Yep. Thanks, Sam. I think it's a good suggestion. One thing, if we were to explore that, we would want to figure out is what are the levers of power, or at least having our voice be heard, that we would use, in that realm as well. When it comes to quality of life issues, we, on the one hand, our PSQL committee can use issues like noise and decibels, as a looking for a better term than as like a hostage issue for when new liquor licenses come before them. But it's something that can be written into items that folks are asking us for, which is to come out in support of a new liquor license. The other thing that comes to mind is our Bex committee tends to address things like homelessness, public bathrooms, etc., by asking for funding for particular efforts to address those. So, I think if we were to shift gears strategically in that way, we would want to think about, okay, what are the ways that we can perhaps start to address those, along the ways that we sometimes use our voice to address other quality of life issues as well. And we might want to think strategically about how we can address that. Yeah, Maki.
Thank you, EJ. This topic sort of reminds me of about 30 years ago when Domino's Pizza, back when they used to drive and have that 30-minute guarantee, got rid of it because of a lawsuit, I believe, in the millions of dollars, like $75 million or something, for a fatality that resulted from folks trying to get the pizza delivered to somebody inside of 30 minutes. There was a gentleman who I forgot the name, and I apologize to this author, who wrote an op-ed in, I think it was Streets Blog or one of the city papers, about that contributing to this particular issue of speeding on bike lanes, particularly by delivery riders. And it's not necessarily because they're trying to be, dangerous riders. I think it's because there's an expectation from those who are receiving those deliveries to get it there as quickly as possible. And obviously there's more money to be made the faster deliveries you make. So similar to Sam's suggestion, might there be a possibility to jump on board from an environment standpoint of T&E, along with the proliferation of the dark storefronts kind of a thing, to encourage the the folks who offer delivery services to say, hey, would it be possible to offer an early delivery, option so that you can order your dinner the day before versus only being able to order the day of, or somehow reducing the overwhelming demand for that instant order now, get it now type of situation. It might be too big to handle, but I was trying to look for a little bit of a different shift in perspective. Thanks.
Thanks, Maki. Yeah, I think we should definitely, I'm essentially keeping a little running list here of our options, of our policy options that could be part of this discussion. And I think tonight can be a little bit of a brainstorm of what are all the policy options, and we can kind of take those away for the next month or so. Think about them offline, and then try and figure out which ones can we come up with the best ideas for implementing. But I think engaging the restaurants and delivery services who might be causing part of the concern through their specific use of the bike lane, because they're rushing to go down the bike lane in the wrong direction because it's a faster way to get someone's delivery to them faster, so they can get in another delivery before the end of the night. We could I think it's certainly worth engaging those services and businesses to see if there's some sort of way to rejigger the economic incentives. I think that's a great idea. Fortunato.
Yeah, I was wondering if there was an effort to contact other community boards in the city regarding kind of their positions of this, because I think like galvanizing multiple kind of boards together towards one policy might be a more effective way of getting the city to change its outlook on the issue.
Yeah, Joel, have we ever talked to any of the other even adjacent community boards about the issue?
I have not. Some people have come to me offline and said that who live in CB4, 9th Avenue, CB4, who've said this is a big problem in their community as well. And they reached out to me through Midtown North Precinct Council. But this has been raised a lot at Midtown North Precinct Council and also Build the Block meetings that the NYPD holds. But I have not reached out to adjacent boards. I think that's a great idea because they must be facing this. And everybody in Midtown and even the Upper East and Upper West is facing the delivery bike, certainly.
Yeah, all over the city. I mean, I'm sure other community boards are having this exact conversation. So I think it might be in our best interest to team up.
Is there like a mailing list of how we would reach transportation committees at other boards? Or
I'm sure Marisa could help us, but I think it's I think it's looking up their emails on their websites and reaching out to that. I mean, we're in communication with several other boards, particularly adjacent to us, about a number of many other issues. So we can certainly reach out to them, in an email blast sort of way.
Okay.
I think it's a great idea, Fortunato. Thanks. Other folks, I particularly since we're brainstorming tonight, other folks on the committee have any thoughts? I'm seeing some hands from members of the public as well, so we'll give them a chance to speak also. But any other ideas that we could just kind of like add to the list of considerations at this point for potential ways to move forward? Some of these, I think in particular, if they're if some of these were to be implementable as quality of life policies that we attach to future resolutions, perhaps it is a position that we end up trying to adopt as a board. On the other hand, if some of these are engagement and otherwise outreach issues, perhaps we just try to institutionalize them within the board office and within our committees, and it doesn't perhaps lead to a resolution. I don't know exactly how this ends up getting implemented, but I think at this point, all of these suggestions should be on the table, and we should really kind of mull them, as a task force, and then perhaps as a full committee, maybe by email over the next month or so, to figure out, which ones are most viable and what our next steps are. Yeah, Noah.
I was thinking some sort of like signs and just if like, we show that you cannot go down this like path, then, it maybe could help in some way. Cause I feel like we just don't really see that with bikes. And, I mean, I feel like it could help if you kind of just show someone that you cannot go down this path.
Yep, and others can correct me, but I think that would be, I think it's the kind of thing that we have talked about with DOT before. If we decided to go all in on that sort of thing, I think it would be incumbent on us to kind of figure out what exactly are we recommending that DOT, and maybe we have to look more closely into what other cities are doing in terms of their signage and what other ways of doing sign. DOT often will tell us that the only real things that they have control over are kind of education and signage. So if we were to prioritize signage, I think it would be engaging DOT, and I think we would want to go to them with, highly specific recommendations of something that is, eminently doable. But I think it's a good suggestion that should be on our list. Yeah, Sam.
I was just going to say, to Noah's point, yes, we have asked DOT at various stages when we have approved bike lanes to include signage explaining what the legalities are and what the rules of the bike lanes are, and DOT, from what I can tell thus far, has declined to follow that recommendation in any way, shape, or form. So it is something that I do think would help, is if there's very, very clear signage. I would also add that one of the things that the NYPD has often said is that it is very, very difficult for them to enforce people breaking bike laws because they simply go too fast. And it is very, very hard for them to both apprehend or ticket or even identify a bike rider. And we have at various stages discussed the options of registering, providing some sort of registration or license plate on bikes. That has been generally dismissed out of hand by pretty much everyone, including the politicians at various stages. I don't think we should necessarily throw that out, though. I know that other cities around the world have looked at registering bikes for precisely that reason, particularly now that we have e-bikes and motorized bikes that tend to go significantly faster than the cars in crowded cities.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. And I'll just mention at the same time that yes, we've talked in the past. I think that would ultimately require us like making a decision to go to the city council or our state assembly people and ask for legislation requiring that registration. I'm not 100% sure if it's something that NYPD could just start requiring by fiat. But the other thing that we have talked about in the past, and again, it would be a major lift, it would be a major policy, and probably at the end of the day, we'd have to talk about whether it's like doable or feasible. We've suggested that the NYPD create a two-wheel enforcement unit so they can safely follow and enforce the law with people who are breaking it on bikes. Those are both options that I think should be on the list, but we should be clear-minded about how difficult they might be. Next up, I think I saw Kathy's hand next. Kathy?
I just was wondering if perhaps somewhere else in the world they've done some traffic calming for bike lanes with, like speed humps, like we have on, certain blocks, school blocks, where you have those long humps in the middle of the road. If they could try something like a speed hump in the bike lane, that would, force people to slow down or get thrown off their bike.
It's an interesting suggestion. I don't know. Does anyone know if that's Joel? Do you have any sense of whether that's done in other jurisdictions?
I haven't seen them in bike lanes. What I have seen are, and we even have them in New York. If you're in a bike lane and just before you get to where a driveway is or something, there'll be raised paint that's sort of, it feels like you're going over something corrugated to slow you down.
Yeah, like bumper strips.
Exactly, bumper strips.
Rubber strips, right.
And we have that in the city, so we could have that in more places if, if we, if that has a traffic calming effect, that would be awesome.
Well, that DOT is doing that experiment with the raised, crosswalks. So it's kind of a similar concept.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kathy. Yeah, should definitely be. I think these will all end up on a spectrum of feasibility. From outreach and engagement, which is ultimately just something that we probably do as a community board and make suggestions to agencies. Up to engaging. The middle of the spectrum is probably engaging DOT to talk about new signage, new materials, try to convince them, that this is worthy of what will ultimately be investment, and perhaps the kind of thing that we need to work into future budgets to say that they should have the money to make these kind of investments. And then at the high end of the spectrum, the biggest bang for your buck type investment would be engaging the city council or the state assembly and senate to pass new regulations or requirements. That perhaps is the least feasible, given the fact that as we've said, there's not a lot of nuance in the public policy here. Marisa, did you have something that you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Kathy that I have spoken to DOT about speed bumps in bike lanes, and I don't want to speak for DOT, but generally in the past, they consider those dangerous for bikers. So they will not install them in bike lanes. And I've heard the same about sort of the treading as well. It's worth talking to DOT again, but that's just the response I've gotten in the past.
Thanks, Marisa. The next hand I saw was Jean.
Hi, I just wanted to add a bit to what Kathy brought up. And I was wondering if this board has looked at maybe some of the more fractional research that's been done by other municipalities that have high bike ridership, looking at how you can sort of coerce bicyclists to ride more safely and be more aware of the environment around them.
Just so I understand the suggestion, you're talking about doing research specifically into what other jurisdictions have done to engage the bicyclists or to implement certain materials?
Yeah, so the yes, exactly. The design of the bike lanes and, for instance, the signage or the way that planters are placed around them. There's a lot of different ways I think that people have looked at kind of the psychology of bicycle riders and safety.
Yep, great. Thanks very much. I think, yeah, we should add that to some of this consideration of design, materials, speed humps, signage, etc. I think, perhaps after this discussion, we could, we can compile all these suggestions on that, spectrum from mere engagement to, DOT, materials and construction to legislation, and kind of see what stuff looks most feasible for next steps. The next hand I saw was George.
Yes, can you hear me? I'm not sure if I'm muted or not now.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. First, I wanted to thank EJ for mentioning the need for a comprehensive street use plan, which is something I have brought up like over the last 20 years, I think, in this committee. So I was happy to it's sinking in, and maybe we can move in that direction. I use a rollator now because of my arthritic condition after a heart attack. So I'm a different kind of vehicular operator, I guess, pushing on the sidewalk. But I do think, and it's a worrisome issue in some ways, because Big Brother questions. My hunch is a very large proportion of all people making deliveries have cell phones, and that cell phones have a ID tracing they can pretty much let you know where you've been, what you've done. It's like a big brother in your pocket. Whether in fact that's appropriate to use that, or to use it only if there's a mishap of some sort, or if people that are abusing the system. But I do think it ought to be thought about, because that technology exists. The other thing is an experience I had maybe 30 years ago when I visited some friends in Berlin, which had quite an extensive bicycle path system way back before we even heard about it or thought about it. And they had pedestrian bicycle conflicts at very busy places. And they created a kind of almost like a fence on the bicycle path that you would have to walk your bike through that zigzagging fence because you couldn't ride fast. Whether that kind of technology is desirable or not, or even thought about, but I think it's something that ought to be explored. If there are physical ways that can diminish the risks and the fear and the fright of pedestrian bicycle conflicts, we ought to think about them. And I'll just leave it at that as an open question. Thank you.
Thanks, George. I think they're, I think they're both, suggestions worthwhile of consideration. Regardless of where you may fall on Big Brother and greater surveillance, it certainly is an option. That is, automated ticketing for vehicles is an option that is used in certain places around the world. I'm not going to say that we're coming out in favor of it, but it's certainly worth perhaps understanding how it's used. I would say that any mechanism of automated ticketing, even if it's just with cameras, would probably end up requiring the legislative solution of registration, so that you've got some type of identifier on your bike, so that it knows who it's tracking and ticketing. I think that's another tally mark next to perhaps that legislative suggestion of require registration for bicycles. The quote unquote zigzag fence for forcing you to walk your bike when merging into a traffic area. I don't know what DOT would say about how frequently you want to require someone to do that if they're crossing traffic every block, but it's certainly another thing that could possibly be brought up in the realm of DOT design, materials, and signage. What other materials and options are there for encouraging better behavior when it comes to designing the bike lanes? So thanks for the suggestion. Next up is Nancy.
These bikes that are motorized, the e-bikes, is there a maximum speed that those bikes go? And if there is there a bike speed limit? I know there's a car speed limit of 25 miles an hour. Do we have a bike speed limit? Could that be posted as an idea?
Yeah, Joel.
So the bikes are subject to the same speed limits as any other vehicle. It's in New York City streets is 25 miles an hour. E-bikes, when the state legislature legalized e-bikes, they said that they're legal up to 20 miles an hour upstate and 25 miles an hour in New York City. So they're allowed to go 25. They're capable of going over 40, many of them. But they're not supposed to go over 25.
Could it be posted somewhere? No one knows this. You know it, Joel, because you researched it, but no one knows this.
I think it's something. I think it's something.
In bike lane. Yeah.
I think it's something else to add to this notion of better DOT signage. On that, to add to that, is there, and this is probably at the high end of the spectrum here, but is there anything that could be done, from a regulation perspective, Joel, to require electric vehicles sold or ride shared in the city to be built in with a speed limit, so they are incapable of going above 25 miles an hour?
So the state did not make it illegal to sell a 40-mile-an-hour bike, and they also don't make it illegal to buy a bike online and have it shipped into New York. So that's not the case. That was the education effort or the outreach effort that NYPD proposed, which was them actually going to bike stores and informing bike store owners that you got to tell your potential customers, you can't ride this moped in the bike lane, or you can't drive this 45-mile-an-hour e-bike at 45 in New York City because it's not legal. But no, there is currently no prohibition on selling an illegal vehicle in the city.
Okay, so I'll add some of that outreach to our to some of the outreach options, but I suppose it's also potentially a legislative something or other, a legislative potential, to require anything sold in the city to not be capable of going above 25. Again, I don't know how you enforce that, and I don't know exactly, if someone how you deal with people who say they're buying it to use it upstate, or somewhere else. But it's something at least worth being part of our discussion internally as we figure out what's most feasible. Yeah, Janice.
Yeah, so I have 2 points, one of which is in regard to the speed limit. I am curious how many people who are riding know how fast they're going. On a bicycle, I don't think there's like a speedometer on that. But the second point I wanted to make was I was thinking a little bit more about what Maki was saying in terms of the delivery people, and this was also brought up again by George. And I was curious if we have any sort of sense of who the riders are that are breaking these rules. Like, are they delivery people? Are they just more casual riders? Are they the people with the electric bicycles or whatnot? Just because I think that might help us focus on where the problems are, why they're happening, and maybe then determine what the best solution is to address those.
I don't think we have those statistics. We have a lot of anecdotal information. I think the delivery people are the most visible because they're carrying plastic bags and you know who they are. But I've certainly, I'm riding my bike and I see people coming the wrong way on city bikes or on clearly, racing bikes or riding on the sidewalk, and they don't look like delivery people wearing all the Lycra, with the $2,000 bikes. So I don't think we have that information, and you're right, it would be good to get it. I don't know how we get it, with our resources, but that's.
Yeah, it doesn't even appear that DOT has that information, or I'm not even sure how they would collect that information. So yeah, it's not even something that is necessarily related to us having resources, but it's unclear how any official agency would really get that in a reliable way. Yeah, Megan.
Hi, so I have just a couple of points as I've been listening to everyone speak. One, I was working on a city council race back in 2021. Uptown, they were experiencing the same issue in CB9. It was something that we dealt with quite a bit. So that's just kind of another note. Secondly, my knowledge of DOT and of kind of how this whole system works and these public agencies, obviously, as you all know, but my question is the folks who would have this information would be privatized companies, DoorDash, Uber, that are employing these people. Obviously, this is a much larger systemic issue because the increase of unemployment leads to more gig workers, leads to more people without work. There's a competition there internally, as Maki was mentioning, for deliveries, et cetera. I wonder if, as far as regulations and legislation goes, kind of insurance as well, requiring these private companies like DoorDash, who are employing these people as on 1099s, to incorporate some sort of level of education and kind of you going through that route. And then secondly, if there's any way that we can gain access to the tracking, because I know that you can track your order. I mean, obviously that's not the entirety of the problem, but it would, my suspicion would be that it would tackle a large portion of folks who are working through these systems, because these private companies do have that data.
Yeah, thanks, Megan. I think that perhaps even more feasible than starting to write legislation that would require the DoorDashes and Uber Eats to do that. Maybe it's worth us trying to engage them, and at least reaching out and saying, are there ways to work together on, doing better education, and what data might you be able to provide us with, which would be in their, it's much more in their interest to offer up what they can offer us for free, instead of facing a push for like new regulation that could impact their bottom line.
And is there sorry. I was gonna say,
no, I think it's a great suggestion, and I was gonna add it to the outreach bucket.
Is there any sort of, anyone know if there's like some sort of educational aspect to signing up to be a delivery person for Uber, DoorDash, any of those entities? I don't think that there is. I think it's pretty much just like social and name.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, but I do think it's worthy of that outreach. Yeah, thanks, Megan. Sam.
Yeah, thanks, EJ. I just want to add, when we're talking about the delivery people versus the leisure cyclists, and being very careful, because there is a perception that the delivery bikers are the problem. And of course, the delivery bikers are vast majority immigrant communities, non-white. And I think that we just need to be careful as we go into a question of, if we're talking about statistically and we have so little information, I'd be hesitant to put the onus on delivery bikes in themselves, because I do, per Joel's point, most of the evidence that we have and what we've been talking about is anecdotal. So if it's a question of quality of life, I think we have to be careful to talk about the bike in some ways, maybe more than the bicyclist. I'm not 100% sure how that's done, but I'm just conscious of it.
Okay, thanks, Sam. And Kathy.
I was just looking at the City Bike website. So they have very basic rules of the road, but that's a DOT contractor. So, I mean, maybe in their app or, on their promotional material, there could be more information about, what the rules of the road are here. I've often seen, people that are obviously tourists that are not from here riding the city bike on the sidewalk. So it doesn't say that. It says, maybe it says stay off the sidewalk, but it just says, stay off the sidewalk, yield to pedestrians, ride with traffic. But to have more information about what it means to be, a courteous cyclist on the City Bike app would be helpful.
Yep. And I think that is something that we have mentioned with DOT before. If we decided to go all in on an education front, maybe we could come up with much more concrete recommendations to DOT about how we would like to see them completely transform the way that you onboard someone onto City Bike, and make sure that they, have to watch a 3-minute video about proper use of the bike lane. I think there are specific things we could recommend. We have talked in general sense with them about education on City Bike in the past.
Simply some translations, some simple translations.
Yeah. Yep. I think we should add that to the DOT education bucket, and I've done that. I'll write these up, and I'll work with Joel and the team to distribute them to everyone, so we can continue this discussion over the coming month. Again, I think it's something to spend a little bit more time on to decide which of these are most feasible, but we should try to bring this effort in for a landing.
EJ,
not
just
yeah,
to
Joel.
what Kathy just said, I just want to say, I just opened my City Bike app. There's nothing that says anything about safety on the app. It just says, here's where you find a bike, here's the code number, go or swipe it, and you're done. There is stuff on the website. There is little tiny print on the bike, but nothing on the app. And most people, especially tourists, use the app. So,
yep.
Yeah, I think you had a public comment or two.
Yeah, no, I know. I thought we were almost out of committee hands, but we've got one more, and then we'll go to the public. Yeah, Noah.
I think when you first download the app, it does make you go through like a maybe 3 or 4 part thing, and you just have to like click through it, and then you can take a bike out. But I think that's only like for the first time. So.
Yep, I think if we were to decide to go all in on education as a path forward, I think we would have to rigorously investigate what it does already and what we think our suggestions and recommendations to DOT would be. Okay, let's take any comments from members of the public who may have them. If you do have comments, please feel free to raise your hand at this time. First, we will hear from Daniel. Daniel, you can unmute yourself and speak.
Thank you. From what you've been talking about, it sounds like there's a lack of data. Certainly, the police don't want to enforce this. It's too hard to. They don't consider it important enough, as you said, unless someone's dead or dismembered. I wondered if. Going back to the gentleman's, the various points about quality of life, I wondered if we might somehow connect this with 311. What if a person who's a pedestrian is nearly knocked over for a bike or feels nearly knocked over by a bike and while walking on the bike lane or to a restaurant or across the street, and they pulled out 311 and they sent in some complaint that I was nearly knocked over, or and they gave some description. It was a delivery driver. It was someone on a $3,000 bicycle. It was a tricycle. It was whatever. And that data, yes, it's possible that data could be, people could put in vindictive, they could, but it still would seem to be a way of collecting the anecdotal thing, a little less anecdotal. I'm reminded of the situation. I just heard this thing. There's been this story in the paper recently about people reporting trucks idling, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
I think that's
it's a little way like that.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's a good suggestion. I think it should definitely go in our engagement bucket to reach out to 311 and determine if there are ways to otherwise standardize the way that some of these incidents get reported, and maybe that's where we can get better data. So engagement with 311. Yeah, thanks very much for the suggestion, Daniel.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Next up, we have Charles. Charles, you can unmute yourself.
Hi there. I sent to the Twitter account of Community Board 5 a link from England where they've done some traffic calming for bicyclists, such as the speed bumps, but it's all about the design. There is a safe way to design bumps, and there's even some bumps where you could have it so the cyclist has to cycle around it instead of over it. But and it goes into great detail about some other ideas. I don't want to tell you them all now, but I did tweet it to the Twitter account. But my issue is to do with the no standing zone outside my building, and my building has a wheelchair ramp, and there's other people with disabilities in my building. And I think I mentioned before that previously, and I've worked with some community board members in the past, Luke Zabado, about the issue of cars just ignoring the signs. And I even got the DOT to make a larger sign saying no standing. I tried the police precinct, I tried the traffic enforcement agents, I even got a phone number directly to one of the traffic enforcement agents, and it seems to just not be resolving itself. Could there be a way that in circumstances like mine where all the remedies are being exhausted and there's still a problem, could somehow we override some of these regulations and just, I would love to just have a little platform like on the busway where, you know, someone can just stand, you know, and they can get into their transportation and be, you know, so that cars, there's a space, a permanent space, so that cars are not always just blocking that way, because I can't get into my vehicles and it is a problem for me, and it's not safe for me to wander into the street to try to get into a car that's, you know, in the middle of the street, and of course it's backing up traffic when they do that too. So it is a real issue that I'm hoping that can eventually get resolved.
Okay, thanks, Charles, for the suggestion. I mean, I think it's a slightly different issue, unless it directly impacts the bikes, but I think it's related, and I think it ends up in that bucket of engaging DOT to find out what other materials and techniques and infrastructure they can build to encourage good usage and behavior, instead of just, you know, signage and you know, nagging. You know, I think good design and good infrastructure, you know, particularly if we were able to investigate what other jurisdictions have done and are doing on that front. I think those are good things to investigate and explore, and to ultimately recommend to DOT. And again, that's kind of, I think of it as a middle of spectrum strategy. It's easier than asking, you know, the state Senate to pass new legislation, but certainly harder than just engaging businesses and agencies. I think it would come down to us making a concerted effort over many years to recommend certain approaches to DOT, and then help work out, you know, we would in a sense kind of have to become urban design experts in, you know, as we start to endorse certain strategies that we see in other jurisdictions, and then help the DOT figure out how they would implement and pay for them. So, you know, I don't want to, you know, make it sound like it'll be easy, but it might end up being the best middle of the road, most viable solution that could end up having real effect. Thank you, Charles, for the comment. Not seeing at this point any other hands from members of the public. Any other final comments from members of the committee? Oh, sorry, one more from a member of the public. Miriam, you can unmute yourself.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, I'm from across the border from community District 4, and I've been very outspoken about this for quite a while. The chair of the Transportation Committee is Christine Berthet and Dale Corvino. Their take is, you know, the cars are the bad guys. I know that I was hit by a cab and I was in a coma, and I've spent my life with multiple back surgeries, including recently. But the bikes, it's the new normal. I shared with them a letter written by Downstate New York ADAPT, which is a disability advocacy group. So a year ago, almost to the day in March, they agreed to write a letter to the DOT asking them to do a better job of educating bikers. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can still hear you.
Yeah, I don't see myself because I wanted to show you something that I wrote that I would be glad to share with you, and that I just submitted to a city council hearing on transportation infrastructure. Anyway, Community Board 4 did write something to the DOT a year ago asking them to educate drivers, bike riders better. Also, advocating for re-signaling the traffic lights on 8th and 9th Avenue in terms of synchronizing that the lights are all red and green at the same time, because bikers tend to go past the light, especially where I am. It's a school district. It's a traffic light in 21st, 22nd, 23rd. So if they're a little out of sync, the bicyclists tend to go. And also to install leading pedestrian signals. Now, this was a year ago. They never answered. I asked Committee Board 4 to contact him. They did. They suggested I contact Corey Johnson when he was in office. Matt Green got back to me. No answer from the DOT. I went to a police meeting, precinct 10. They contacted DOT. No answer. They said they were going to contact Eric Botcher. I've been in touch with Eric Botcher and also Brad Hoylman. I was actually on the street when he was campaigning, and I said, look, red light, red light. He said he was sympathetic. Those are people also to contact. I don't know what'll come out of it, but they're aware. Somebody in my district, it isn't true that it's just perception. People have been injured, people have been killed. A senior was killed on 23rd and 6th. In Chelsea, a woman was hit by a electric bike and she broke 2 hips. The captain told me that they don't go after the bikers. They don't know who they are. There's no accountability, and they don't want them their staff going through busy areas and possibly hurting other people. He's sympathetic. This is an ongoing problem. I did go to the city council meetings. There's a new chair of the Department of Transportation, Brooks Powers, and I was going to send, you don't see me, or maybe you do, I don't see myself, but my letter, and also downstate New York Adapt also upgraded their letter and sent it to the meeting. So there are still some avenues, plus Mayor Adams a few weeks ago talked about the bikers going through the red lights. I'm just going to read it to you. It's only a few
Miriam, thank you very much. You don't need to read it to. We are aware.
Stop, let them cross. That was the mantra. Those could be signs.
Yep. No, I think so. And a lot of what you've mentioned is stuff that our task force has uncovered over its past several months of work, including the degree to which NYPD has said that they simply won't enforce these issues for the reasons that you mentioned. If you have any materials that you'd like to circulate with the committee, please feel free to send them to our board office email, and we'll make sure that they get circulated. But
I don't know your email. If you tell me the email.
Marisa, what's the board office email?
It's office@cb5.org. O-R-G.
Okay, I also want to say, I don't think this is perception, and I've heard that a lot. People have been killed, people have been injured. This woman broke 2 hips, and I think,
Miriam, I think we definitely agree with you. As we said at the top, we're aware of the problem at this point. We're trying to focus in on policy prescriptions this evening. So I very, very sorry to hear about your specific troubles, and we're very well aware of the issue and the safety issue at this point. We're trying to figure out how to move forward from a policy perspective to start to help address those. Some of the things that you just mentioned are incredibly useful, such as and we should be added to the policy prescriptions that we're kind of considering here, such as resignaling traffic lights, leading pedestrian signals. I'm writing those down, and I want to make sure that they're part of our ongoing discussion. But we're definitely well aware of the issue, and we thank you for emphasizing it again. So thanks very much, Miriam, for your comments tonight. And if you have any other materials that you'd like to share with the committee, please send them to office@cb5.org, and we'll make sure that they get circulated. Thanks very much. Anyway, at this point, I think we have compiled here a large selection, like I said, on a spectrum of various policy approaches that we as a community board can try to take at this point to begin to address the issues. We'll compile these. I'll work with Joel, Noah, and BJ to try and compile them and circulate them via email so that we can continue this discussion in the meantime. And I do think that we should probably should start to figure out at least an internal strategy as a community board for moving forward, so that we're not just endlessly trying to get more information and trying to figure out what exactly is our path forward. We can adjust as needed in the future, but it would behoove us as a community board to really have a strategy on this. And I think this has been a really good brainstorming session, a way to kick off that final phase of moving us towards some kind of action or strategy that we can begin to take as a community board. Any other final comments from any members of the committee before we wrap up? But I think circulating a summary will be next steps, and we'll continue this discussion over the next month or two as we try to figure out a policy that we can adopt as a committee. Yeah, Vicky.
Good evening, everyone. I came into the meeting with one thought. Some of you who know me will know that I talk about my belief, which is strength in numbers. And so I came in with the thought that whatever comes out of this, whether it be tonight or any other night, fits right in with what Fortunato brought up. I plan to take whatever comes from the committee and then from the full board to Borough Board and talk to my colleagues about it. I know already that every board does have this problem. It's not just Board 9, it's not just Board 4, they all do. And the only way that we will be able to have any weight carried by what we're saying is if we do this collectively. It's got to be a coalition. In fact, it may even be a coalition of 5 boroughs. It's got to be. It's all over the city. And it's always the same complaints. So I just wanted to mention that I won't, obviously, since we're not doing anything this evening, whatever comes out as a result of tonight's discussion, which has been super comments and suggestions, I will talk to my colleagues about. In fact, I think what I'll do is, it's easy for me because there are 11 others, so I can just, you don't have to worry about getting in touch with their committees. I'll ask them to please get their committees, their T&E committees or transportation committees on board with us. So I just wanted to mention that because that's definitely something that I've been thinking right from the beginning. And I think everyone was wonderful tonight. Thank you so much for all the thought that's gone into this and for the work that Joel, you and the task force has been doing on this. I can't believe you haven't given up.
Thanks, Vicky. That's actually really, really helpful as we kind of consider this menu of potential strategic options over the coming weeks, to think about it in the lens of, what can we adopt that can really be, shared with the other community boards in a strength in numbers sort of way. It might behoove us to think about, adopting specific strategies that we think are extendable to other community boards, such that, we're really all getting behind a policy prescription, set of policy prescriptions together, instead of just choosing something that we think is right for our district, and thus we'd have to go it alone. So I think that's actually really helpful. And I just want to second what Vicky said. I thought this was a tremendous discussion with a great number of suggestions and ideas and brainstorms from all the members of the committee. So thank you all for your engagement, and the members of the public who are in attendance. Thank you all for everyone who spoke, all the ideas that you offered. We've added them to our summary that we will circulate now try to form an actual strategy around and a set of policy prescriptions. So thank you to everyone who participated in this discussion. there's no action to take, but we will circulate all those materials as the discussion continues in the coming weeks. And I think with that, we'll wrap up that discussion. Any new business from any members of the committee or any of the members of the public who are in attendance this evening? Not. Oh, we got one hand from Charles. Charles, go ahead.
Hi. Yeah, I just realized that my comment about the no standing zone should have been in the new business section. I do apologize.
Okay.
If that can be put in that section, that'd be great to try to resolve that issue of cars just ignoring the signage and the lack of ticketing. And even when they are ticketed, they seem to not care because it seems to just be always happening. And I'm hoping that's something could be done to resolve that issue.
Do you want to give us the address one more time of the location you're talking about, Charles?
Yeah, it's the south side of East 28th Street between 5th and Madison, and there's a no standing zone right there.
Okay.
Right there.
Thanks. We'll try to look in. We'll try to work with the board office to look into it on your behalf.
When Luke Zabado was on the board, I don't know if you have access to his notes, but he wrote up. He was dealing with that issue. For example, I had a lot of MTA buses parking there, and he was able to resolve that. But guess what? When the MTA buses stop using it as a illegal layover stop, then all the other vehicles come parking in. So it's like you get rid of one issue, and then you get a load of others coming in. So I don't know if you have access to his notes, but he has. Yeah, if you can, that'd be great. But I can call the office tomorrow with more details too.
Yeah. I mean, please do. We'll share this with the.
EJ, if I'm not mistaken, I think Marisa is on top of this. I think she's been working on this whole issue. So the board office is already handling it.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Vicky. Thanks, Charles. Okay. Not seeing any other hands for new business. We will wrap up this evening's committee meeting. I want to, again, great discussion, even though there was no vote tonight. I think this was a tremendous discussion and kind of laid the groundwork for continuing work. So thank you again to everybody on the committee and members of the public for participating. I really personally appreciate it. And with that, we will wrap up the meeting. Thanks very much to everyone, and
Thank you,
please have a great rest of the night.